Okay, guys, it is high noon on Monday, and I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm Tom Fulkerson, your qualifying broker for the Heart of Atlanta Group offices. And today is Broker Chat, and we're going to talk about a couple of things. And of course, if there's a topic or anything that you would like me to address, I'm happy to do so. But we're going to talk about earnest money today and best practices for earnest money. But before I get into that, I want to talk about a couple of things that I see continuously as we're going through files that I want to bring to your attention. The first thing is when a closing attorney is holding earnest money. I got to tell you that 95% of the time, the F511, which is the agreement that the closing attorney is supposed to sign agreeing to be the holder, is usually not uploaded in the file. And it's very clear on the top of both of those forms that if the closing attorney is going to be the holder of the earnest money, that both the F510, which is the holder of the earnest money, and the F511, which is the agreement of the closing attorney to be the holder, both need to be executed and uploaded to your file. And I don't understand why there's so much confusion on that, because it's clear at the top of each form that if you're using one or the other has to be there. The reason this is important is because I have had experience with attorneys giving earnest money back to the wrong party because they said we never agreed to hold the earnest money. So that was, they didn't sign the agreement, and so they gave the earnest money back to the wrong party. So please, please, please make sure that if you are allowing a closing attorney to hold the earnest money, to make sure that both those forms are being executed. Are there any questions about that? Any feedback on that issue? Okay, enough said. Before we get into the topic of earnest money, I want to bring up one more thing that I've been dealing with more so than I would like to, and that is with the Georgia Real Estate Commission. Guys, they're coming after you if you're not in compliance with your website, signage, the whole kit and caboodle, and fines are being issued. We had two Decatur agents that both got fined and had to redo a lot of their marketing because they were not in compliance. So if you have any questions about that, and if you're not sure, then see your broker or see your team leader before you order anything or before you publish. And as you all know from going through licensing class, all advertising must go through the broker. And I know that's a difficult thing to do. I can't tell you that I rarely see anything except from a new agent before they get something printed. I don't ever see anything to approve for advertising. Any questions about that?
No, and Tom, I just want to add, this
Hey,
is Barbara.
Barbara.
How are you today? And hello to the Keller Williams family. I just want to add that it's also a violation of our code of ethics.
Yes, it is. So, and this is not just somebody, not a new agent. This was an agent that's been using the same website for about 18 years. And they had to redo their website, and they also got a fine from the Real Estate Commission. So now's the time to double check and make sure you're in compliance with everything before you get investigated. Nobody wants to be investigated. All right. We're going to talk about best practices with earnest money. And I know that I talk about earnest money a lot, but there's a reason for that, because handling other people's money is the quickest way to go to real estate jail than any other thing that we do. And I think we've become in this market a little lackadaisical about that process. And, you know, we're in a shift right now, guys. And so I really want to make sure that you all take it very seriously about handling other people's money, particularly with earnest money. And I want to get into some of the issues that I've been dealing with recently regarding that. Number one, you should always strive to get your earnest money collected prior to going under contract, okay? Or before the contract goes binding. That is the best way to show the other party, if you're representing a buyer, that your buyer is serious, okay? And you all have heard me talk about this before. So we've had instances in the past where we've had 0 days of due diligence and the earnest money was being collected 3 days after a binding agreement. And guess what? The buyer terminated. There was no due diligence and the other party was due the earnest money and they never turned in the earnest money. So please, please be careful with that. If you're not sure of your office's policies regarding earnest money, please get with either myself or your team leader or your MCA, and they can show you what needs to be done. So has anybody had any issues recently with earnest money disputes that weren't handled correctly? I can tell you that when you allow a closing attorney, if you're a listing agent and you allow a closing attorney to hold earnest money because that's what the buyer wants to do, and you have no relationship with that closing attorney, sometimes that can be very difficult, particularly with the distribution of earnest money if the contract falls apart. I've seen instances where mainly the closing attorney will just interplead the funds rather than make a decision about who's to get the earnest money because they don't want to get involved. They're not governed by the same rules that we are, and they're not governed by the Georgia Real Estate Commission. So I want you all to all take a hard look at that when you are either writing offers or receiving offers as a listing agent about who is the holder of the earnest money. Because I spend a disproportionate amount of my time trying to resolve issues with other parties holding earnest money, and I'm not even the holder of the earnest money. So what happens if there's a dispute and I am the holder of the earnest money? Can anybody answer that question?
You send the 10-day.
The buyer's terminated, the seller won't sign the agreement. What happens?
10-day letter, or you go
Hey,
to,
Nicole,
What's that,
10-day
Tom? 10-day
are
letter?
you answering the question?
I was, just because I'm going through this now. So yes, we sent the 10-day letter to both parties, and we're still in that 10 days. We're still waiting for a response, if any, from the buyer who thinks they should be getting the money.
That's right. If there's a dispute over the earnest money, or if that termination, either the unilateral or the mutual termination, is not signed by one of the other parties, the holder of the earnest money can distribute the funds based on a reasonable interpretation of the contract. And the 10-day letter goes out to all parties. And if you're not familiar with this, it's in the contract. You need to read up on it if you're not familiar with that process. But the 10-day letter goes out. The holder gives a reasonable interpretation. And if the party who's not receiving the earnest money objects and they send that holder an objection, then the holder can either send out another letter changing their position, or they will send out another letter saying my original interpretation stands. We're fortunate to have Eileen Smith, who works under my compliance team, to handle the 10-day letters, because it's a pretty daunting task these days with parties not wanting to sign that document and disperse funds. We've also had issues where closing attorneys, instead of looking at a reasonable interpretation of the contract, too much into the circumstances around that contract and distribute the funds, in my opinion, to the wrong people. So again, if it's your buyer or your seller, you would much rather have Keller Williams holding the earnest money than somebody you have no relationship with. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to side with your client. If your client's wrong, they're wrong. But what I will tell you is that those letters go out quickly, and we try to get that resolved as quickly as possible, because that is other people's money that we don't want to hold if we don't have to.
So
Any
Tom,
questions?
I have a question. If
Okay,
if we have to send a second letter, let's say that my buyer, who believes they should be getting their money back, disputes your first decision, and you send another letter after reviewing again, how long do we wait again? Is it another 10-day?
no, not at all. I usually, when I write a letter, and Eileen does this the same way, that we say, well, our original interpretation stands and we're releasing the earnest money today.
Okay, great.
So we don't have to wait another 10 days. Now, if there's a circumstances of information that we didn't have access to, or if we didn't get an accurate depiction of what happened, then if we change our position and give it back to the other party that made the objection, then we do have to wait another 10 days. Because at that point, the other party has the right to object again. But I can tell you, as I can't think of any time where I haven't where I've had to redo a 10-day letter and side against the other party. It's usually pretty clear in the contract. If you look at the contract and read the contract, it's pretty clear about who would be in default. And
Makes
it's
sense.
so aggravating that people terminate during their due diligence and the seller won't sign the agreement. But clearly, the reason for the seller's signature on that, I used to get this question a lot. I haven't heard it lately. Like, well, why does the seller have to sign if it's a matter of if the buyer terminated during due diligence? And my stock answer is, if the buyer or their home inspector went into the property during their due diligence period and punched a hole in the wall, don't you think that seller would be entitled to some kind of compensation out of that earnest money? So that's really the reason that the seller and both the buyer and the seller have to sign at the bottom of that form. Any questions about that?
And Tom, can you just make it clear that even going through this process, even though the earnest money wasn't received, that it does not automatically terminate this contract?
What happens is if, and I've had to get Ned Blumenthal with Weissman involved with this, is that if we as the holder, if I am the holder and I did not know that that earnest money had not been turned in, and then suddenly the deal blows up and the other party's looking for the earnest money, and I find that we have not received it, I have to alert that party that they have 3 banking days to cure the default. And if on the 4th day, they haven't cured the default, which they don't intend to do anyway, then we would notify the other party and let them know that we notified the party in breach. We gave them the 3 banking days. And on the 4th day, the seller can either move forward with no earnest money, or they can terminate the agreement. So recently, we had buyers that terminated their agreement. They didn't have a due diligence period. We knew that they didn't turn in the earnest money. And rather than sign a termination, I told the other broker that I had been in contact with that buyer. We've given them notice, official notice, that they're in breach, and we're giving them 3 banking days to cure the default. So basically turned it back around so that our client, even though they were in default, we put the onus back on the seller to terminate the agreement. Because remember, guys, regardless of whether they're in default or not, we have a brokerage agreement with them to try and protect them. And that's how we terminated that agreement, is that we actually made the seller terminate the agreement. That makes sense?
It does to me.
Yes.
Y'all are being awfully
Yes.
quiet today. It's going to be a short call if you
Yes.
don't participate. All right, so I want to make sure everybody's clear about that process. Sharon.
Yep.
Hi,
Hi,
Tom.
Sharon.
I'm not clear because maybe I missed something. Are we saying that if the buyer is in default because they've not paid the earnest money and they back out of the deal, that the seller has no recourse?
Sharon, I lost you there for a minute. I'm sorry. I was changing I'm having a little bit of a difficulty hearing.
Okay, I'm just trying to get clarity on what happens when the buyer decides they do not want to move forward. They did not send their earnest money in time. So can the seller go after that buyer for the earnest money, or the buyer doesn't have to do anything at this point?
The seller has the right to pursue legal action against that buyer if they want to pursue legal action about it. But what I did in this circumstance was take Keller Williams out of the mix. So we did what we had to do on our end to notify the other party that the buyer had not turned in their earnest money. And then the seller ultimately terminated the contract because the buyer had no intention of turning in the earnest money. But that seller, of course, they're threatening to, to sue them over it. But yeah, they have the right to go after them, probably depending on the amount of earnest money in small claims court, more than likely. But what I did was remove Keller Williams from that equation, so we didn't have to be involved in it.
Okay,
That answer your question?
it does, it does.
Okay.
And just one last question. So if we're still at the point where, or we're beyond the point where the buyer's earnest money is past due, we cannot, or we can still go ahead and send them notification that they're in default and give them the number of days that the contract allows them to have to cure that default.
Yeah, Sharon, I'm having a hold on one second.
I'll send you a message, Tom.
I'm having problems with makers. See if you can do it now.
Okay, this is what I've done in the past. This is what I've done. If the earnest money has not come in within those 3 days that we agreed to contractually, then I send them notification that they're in default. I give them the information in terms of the time that they have, the number of days to cure that default.
They have 3 banking days to cure the default once they've been noticed, once they've been sent official notice that they're in breach.
Right, right. So even though they've decided prior to that point that they do not want to move forward, we still do that, even though we know
That's
that
right.
they're not going to send it. Okay, all right, thanks.
That's right. We have a fiduciary responsibility to protect that client as much as we can, even though they're in default.
Right.
Anybody else? Okay, I want to one more thing that I think you guys, I think I just froze up.
We still see you, Tom.
All right, I think I'm back now. Sorry, guys, I'm having some technical difficulties. One last thing I want to talk about today is that I think everybody needs to be paying particularly attention to, especially with interest rates where they are, is I think that when you are a listing agent and you're receiving offers, you need to be paying attention to that interest rate that's on the financing contingency. Because if they have anything less than 5%, that's a way for them to get out of the contract if they want to back out of the contract. So you need to make sure that you have a realistic interest rate on your offer, particularly if you are a listing agent. Otherwise, we know they're not going to be able to get a loan for under 5% today, unless it's an adjustable rate mortgage, and that would be described on the form itself. So please make sure you're checking that interest rate so that they don't have an out on the contract if they decide to change their mind at the last minute and they have a financing contingency. Does that make sense?
No, Tom, hi, this is Amy. Can you explain why a low interest rate would allow them to have an out?
Because it says on the form that they're getting a loan. Let's just say they're putting 20% down. They're getting an 80% loan for 30 years at 4.5%. We know that that's not possible today. So all the lender would have to do is write a loan denial letter because they're not going to qualify for that rate because the rate doesn't exist. So The only thing I'm wanting you to make sure that you're paying attention to is the rate that's on that either conventional FHA or VA financing document. Because if it is below 5%, probably, I don't even know where we are today with rates. Probably if it's below 5.5%, that allows the buyer's lender to write a loan denial letter because they're not going to qualify for that rate because it doesn't exist.
Okay,
Got a
thanks.
question. I got a question because
Okay,
one is that those when you get the pre-approval letter, they don't always have an interest rate on them. And also, if the pre-approval letter says, let's just say, for example, it says 5.5%, and their rate is 5 point, they can't get a rate for 5.5% because it doesn't exist. So you're saying that they can just terminate? Is that correct?
that's right. If they have a rate on that form that's less than where we are today with rates, and they decide they want to back out for financing reasons, that lender can write a letter of loan denial because that rate doesn't exist. So we have to be very, very careful about the rate that's on those forms. And I want you all to start paying attention to that because we haven't had to in a long time. But guess what? We've got to do that now. Carlin?
There we go. So now, as a buyer's agent, as a listing agent, I would normally call that lender and say, just to find out, to make sure this pre-approval letter is current, and I would want to get the interest rate, et cetera. Now, I am presuming the lender must tell me accurate information, correct? I mean, they can't, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, there shouldn't, this, like you say a 5% rate, that basically doesn't exist. So if I reach out to the lender is responsible for giving me the accurate information. Is that correct? Am I understanding?
Well, that's correct. I mean, you need to be getting a pre-approval letter with an interest rate on that pre-approval letter.
Correct.
But just remember, whatever that lender tells you is, may or may not be on the contract. So we need information on the contract that's accurate, or otherwise it could cause an issue for you down the road.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So
Because,
the interest
Tom,
rate.
I
Okay.
just want to add that because on the flip side of that, another savvy agent could use that as a loophole to get her client out of the contract and get the earnest money back.
That's what yeah.
That's right.
Because the interest, if someone provides a pre-approval letter on Thursday to the buyer, and then they put an offer in on Monday, interest rates could be different versus Thursday, and maybe I'm getting too deep with it. I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
And
the
see, then
moral
that's
of the story is rates continue to climb. It's very, very critical for you guys to stay on top of that and make sure that whatever contract you are taking for your seller or writing for your buyer needs to have an accurate rate on there. I've been through this before, and that's why I'm telling you. I mean, I forget how long ago it was, but years ago when rates were climbing, we had the same issue, and agents weren't paying attention to the rate on the financing form, and buyers were able to get out of the contract because they weren't able to qualify for that rate because it didn't exist. All right, guys, what else have you got for me today? Nothing? So are we all clear on two things? If the closing attorney is holding the earnest money, we must have an F510 and an F511 executed. I've seen files where they've got the F511 in there, but it's not been signed by anybody. That doesn't mean anything. We've got to have it signed by the attorney. And number two, the collection and deposit of earnest money. I want to make sure you all are clear on that and what happens if the termination agreement is not signed by the seller.
Yeah.
10-day letter by the holder giving the earnest money based on a reasonable interpretation of the contract.
Hey, Tom, this is Lisa Mingo. How are you? Can you hear me?
All right, guys, I'm having a lot of
Tom.
technical difficulties today. So
Tom.
if you don't have anything else, I want to thank you for
Tom.
joining our call today.
I don't think you can hear us.
I'm not sure when our next call will be. It'll probably be the Monday after the 4th of July, more than
I guess he
likely,
can't
would
see
be
us
my
either.
guess. Barbara, did you say, oh, Barbara said there are questions I can't hear. My computer keeps going in and out, guys. I'm having some difficulty. Is there another question?
Yep. Can you hear me, Tom?
You might want to put the question in the chat.
Okay.
All right, she's putting it in the chat. I apologize. My laptop keeps going in and out. I don't know if it's a Zoom issue or what. Can you all hear me okay? Somebody say yes or no.
Yes.
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 Okay, this is from Lisa Mingo. Hi, Tom. If KW holds the earnest money, is there an easy way to transfer properties? That's a very good question. Once it's been deposited, it must be returned to that buyer, and we must collect a new check for the new property. We cannot transfer earnest money funds once it's been deposited. Does that answer your question, Lisa?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Thanks for bringing that up. That's a question that we get quite a bit. Barbara, we have been transferring funds at Keller Williams Atlanta Classic. No, I'll have to get with Kadar and put a stop to that. We're not allowed to do that. Back in my early broker days, I used to do that too. And then I went to a trust account with Greg Dunn and he corrected me on that. We cannot do it. The Real Estate Commission requires essentially a piece of paper for every contract.
Hey, Tom,
So
this is
those funds
Lori.
have to be returned and we have to collect new funds for a new contract.
Hi, Tom.
Are there any other questions?
Lord, he can't hear you. You have to
Okay,
put it in
here's
the
a
chat.
question. If the financing contingency says to be determined, the interest rate, yes, that is a red flag. that creates an invalid contract if the form doesn't have correct information, just like you can't say at par. It has to be filled in with an accurate number. Lori, you had a question?
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Lori, are you putting your question in chat?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can, Tom can.
Okay, Tom can. I'm putting it in the chat. I just want, well, Barb, just let it, I guess everybody can hear me. You can let Tom know.
Oh, I can hear you now.
Okay,
Something
great, yeah.
happened.
I was just
Okay,
I'm just gonna respond to Barbara's question. Our office, Keller Williams Atlanta Classic, they stopped transferring earnest money a while ago. It's been a while.
okay, good.
Thank you, Lori.
Because I thought that Kadar and I had had that discussion many times.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I apologize for putting out bad information.
No worries. At some point, they probably were doing that. Anyone else? Now that my audio's working. Angela says, we have been putting earnest money funds on hold with the office. Can we continue to do so? Yes, you can hold. Yes, that's the right thing to do. You must turn it into the brokerage, but we don't have to deposit it until you tell us to deposit it. But you, as an agent, cannot hold those funds.
No, I'm just talking about with the office. Just wanted to make sure that we're still able to do that. And you know, if we have not gone on a contract yet, I want to make sure that we
Yes,
have the
yes.
funds on file. Okay,
That's the right thing to do, is turn it into the office and have them hold the funds until
Hold
you're
it.
ready for it to be
and then I'll
deposited.
let them know when we have the property on the contract to go ahead and deposit.
Right. That's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions, guys? Any other topic you'd like to discuss today on this call? I know the market's changing and different skill sets are going to be required moving forward. So if you have anything like, you know,
I have a question. This is Christine.
Hello.
Hi, Midtown, Keller Williams Midtown. Since you were saying different skill sets are required in the new market, what in particular are you thinking about?
Well, number one, you're going to have to work harder.
Okay.
Because we've been in a market where if you were a listing agent, you just, you know, put it on the market and you would get multiple offers on the property. Those days are over, except in rare circumstances. So my suggestion is you need to make sure that you have a very strong value proposition to talk to your sellers and buyers about and how you can best assist them as a professional. We're going to start seeing a whole lot more caravans, open houses, things that we haven't really been having to do in a long time because houses just, they go under contract so quickly. That's changing. We also need to make sure that you're checking for things on the contract, like the interest rate, for example, on the financing contingency to make sure it makes sense. Because there's always people trying to look for a loophole to get out of a contract. And that's one way to do it. So I think in terms of skill set, those are things that I would say you really need to be paying attention to. You're going to have to stay on top of interest rates and where they're going in order to assist your buyers and your sellers. You need to go, if you're mortgage company that's in your office offers classes on what they offer, you need to start attending those because there's all kinds of different programs available to buyers today. And there will be another whole set coming out because of the interest rates. You need to familiarize yourself with adjustable rate mortgages and ask questions about how long a buyer may intend on staying in a particular property. Because if it's for 5 years, for example, today, a 7-year adjustable rate mortgage would probably be a good fit for them. And they're going to get a whole lot better rate on that than if they go conventional. So those are just some of the things that I think we as professionals are just going to have to own up on our skills. How long have you been a realtor?
4 years now.
4 years. Okay, so you've really come into, gotten into real estate at a time where the market has been extremely good. And some of the skill sets I just mentioned, we really haven't had to use a whole lot of those in the last, really 4 years because the market's been so good. So
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the open
houses
houses again because I did a lot of open houses and I got maybe 20% of my business from open houses.
Yeah. Open houses are a great way to position yourself in a particular neighborhood and to pick up buyers.
And I have one more question. I saw the advertisement about this newer company called Knox. They offered to an owner to use the equity to purchase their new home and then use the current home as a rental, and they manage everything.
Well, we are a company, Keller Williams is a company that offers sellers a lot of different ways to sell their property. And one thing that you probably need to investigate are Keller offers. A great way for a seller to unload their property through that program.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was clear enough, but this company, they don't want the seller to sell their house. They want the seller to rent their house, use the seller's equity to help them into a new house. And then the same time, they are also a rental or property management company where they say you can keep your current house, use it as an income producing asset. We manage everything, take the hassle and the headache away from you, and you can buy your new house. It's called
I'm
Knox.
not familiar with that program.
It's called Knox.
Knox
With an X, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, so then that falls into less sellers, basically, if a lot of people decide to do that.
Well, I mean, that's a segment of the market that may want to take advantage of something like that. But generally, when sellers are ready to sell, they're ready to move on to another property for a different reason. Maybe they need to upsize, maybe they need to downsize. And of course, they've going to have equity in order for that to happen. So,
Yeah.
but that's one of the things that, would be great for you to get more experience with, because that is something that you can talk to your sellers about.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Any other feedback? Any other questions? Anything else you want to talk about? All right. Well, I appreciate everyone joining me today. I think Deborah, are you on? I think Deborah Blue's on the call. Deborah, do you have anything you'd like to add? All right. You all have an awesome week.
Hey,
Have a
Tom,
very safe.
can you hear me, Tom?
Yes.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I apologize. I just wanted to add that mid-year revisions have gone out, so they want to make sure that they review their contracts again.
Are you talking about the contract revisions?
Yes.
Okay. All right, guys, thanks for joining me today. I hope you got a little bit of something out of this call today. We will see you in July. Have a great day.